talk about voter ID. In fact, let's talk a little bit more about FFC, fraud, foreigners, and cheating. The Democrat Party disappears without it. Disappears. I'm not saying they lose a little bit of power. You know, they turn into a 45% party. They're a 20% party. They disappear without it. That's why they continue to get asked about voter ID. They get asked about this on camera, and I have to give some credit where it's due. Oftentimes, these TV hosts are now asking them, but the people want this. The people want voter ID. The people want voter ID. Why don't you?
For example, but requiring basic ID in order to vote is really popular. A Pew poll from a few months ago showed 83% of Americans, including 71% of your fellow Democrats, support requiring an ID to vote. Why are they wrong?
What Republicans are trying to do is to engage in clear and blatant voter suppression. What Donald Trump wants to do is try to nationalize the election. Translation, steal it.
It's still going to be something that disenfranchises people that don't have the proper real ID, driver's license ID, that don't have the ID necessary to vote, even though they are citizens. This is another way to simply try to suppress the vote.
It's Jim Crow 2.0, and I called it Jim Crow 2.0, and the right wing went nuts all over the internet. That's because they know it's true.
No, it's not a voter ID law, which just says you bring ID with you to the polls when you go vote, which exists in a lot of states. That's not what this is. This says you've got to prove that you're a U.S. citizen.
71% of Democrats? Let's set aside 83% of Americans. Think about the Republican Party. Do you vote Republican? I do. What's a issue that's 71% approval on the right? Guns is actually a great example. Guns. That's insanely popular with Republicans. Second Amendment rights. It's how the right thinks. Think about all the leadership, not one or two guys saying something dumb. Think about all the leadership of the Republican Party coming out against Second Amendment rights. Even if they felt that way, they would never say it, right? You would never say it. You don't go against 71% of your base. But Democrat politicians do. Why? They disappear without it. Their very survival is at stake. They wouldn't care if it was 100% of Democrats who wanted voter ID. They still couldn't support it because Jamie Raskin knows what Chuck Schumer knows, who knows what Hakeem Jeffries knows. They all know the same thing. They disappear if you have to show an ID to vote because Democrats cheat in every single election. You think those explanations were bad? Here was Dome. Anyway, that's the best she could come up with. She does know the truth, though. She disappears. Never has a chance to be president if we have to have a people show ID to vote. Without fraud, foreigners, and cheating, there is no Democrat Party.
Only way we're going to have a great future in America is if we welcome and embrace immigrants, the dreamers, and all of them, because our ultimate goal is to help the dreamers, but get a path to citizenship for all 11 million or however many undocumented there are here.
They're pretty honest about it if you just listen. Joining me now, Peter Schweizer has a wonderful, wonderful book out, The Invisible Coup, How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. I love that because that's exactly what they do. Peter, you wrote the book on it. Tell me, how do they use it as a weapon?
Well, I think what we have to understand is when we think of immigration, we have in our mind like the Irish 120 years ago or 50 years ago, migrants coming to the United States wanting to embrace the American dream, that sort of thing. What's really happened is since 1980 with the Mariel boat lift, foreign governments and adversaries have realized we can actually use this as a weapon. We can actually use migrants as a tool to subvert the United States politically, in terms of social stability, culturally, you name it. So it's a subversive act. And that's not me just saying that. I quote officials from China, from Mexico, from the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, all saying that. And that is, in fact, what is going on with the cooperation of certain people in the United States who gain a political advantage from the same thing.
All right, Peter, let's focus domestically then. Let's talk about them before we get to the foreigners. Who are these people domestically collaborating with foreign enemies? What do they get out of it? Explain.
Yeah, so first you have Democratic Party politicians who realize this is an electoral winner for them. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden have all done one thing in common when they were president, and that is that they gutted the rules for applying and getting citizenship in the United States. They got rid of or largely ignored criminal background checks. You're required to pass one to get citizenship. They gutted that process. They gutted the literacy requirements that you understand basic English. And they also gutted the tests that you were supposed to take to, basic understanding of American government. Why did they do that? Well, Bill Clinton discovered in 1996 that new immigrants vote 85% Democrat. So the goal became to mint as many new citizens as possible and ignoring all the things that were necessary for citizenship. And that's why the biggest years for naturalizations in modern American history were 1996, 2012 and 2024, all of them re-election years for Democrat presidents. So there's a huge political advantage. Now, progressives, which are increasingly the dominant wing of the Democratic Party, also see immigrants as a force that moves the United States further to the left. There are all kinds of surveys, I cite some of them in the book, that shows that migrants to the United States are considerably on the left, whether it's on social issues, whether it's on the size and scope of government, whether it's things like the Second Amendment, whether it is teaching American patriotism. They all fall further on the left. So progressives see them as a transformative force, that's their words, not mine, that move the United States politically to the left. And then the final thing I would say, Jesse, is when it comes to how congressional districts are apportioned and how the Electoral College, which is how we select our president, that is based on the U.S. Census, which counts people. It does not count citizens. So a state like California has all the incentive in the world to have as many illegals as possible within the state borders. It's estimated that California has between 4 and 7 more congressmen than it actually should because of the presence of illegals. And even if you take that conservative estimate, Jesse, 4 congressmen in California for illegals, that's more than the congressional delegation for 13 other states in the United States. So it's a huge, huge deal on all those fronts.
Okay, Peter, let's talk about their children, because this part could be so confusing for patriotic Americans, wherever you fall on the patriotism scale. Okay, so there's some brand new person who got here from Somalia. Maybe her father was a communist and a colonel in the army. Well, we'll set that aside. It's easy to understand why that person would be a commie piece of trash. But their children get to grow up in the United States of America, paved roads, wonderful hospitals, good schools, clothes on their back, air conditioning, heating, all these things. Why are their children dirty America-hating scum so much of the time, setting aside groups like the Cubans and others?
Yeah, well, the biggest problem in this space is birth tourism. I mean, this is, I think, a shocking thing that people don't even realize. You have a massive worldwide industry, most of it concentrated in China, whereby Chinese elites fly to the United States with a pregnant woman. That woman gives birth here. So that child, according to birthright citizenship, the claims of birthright citizenship, is immediately a U.S. citizen. But that child is flown back to China where it is raised. It goes through CP schools. These are children of the elite. And when they turn 18, Jesse, they're going to be able to vote in our elections. They're going to be able to donate to political campaigns. They're going to be able to, apply for sensitive government jobs. And our federal government does not track these numbers. We have no idea how many people have actually done this, because we don't, on a birth certificate, list the nationality of the parents. But the Chinese government has looked at it, they've encouraged it, and they believe that over the past 13 years, every single year, roughly 100,000 Chinese have done this. And if you do the math, Jesse, that means you've got more than 1 million U.S. citizens, I'm going to put that in air quotes, U.S. citizens being raised in China. They're going to be voting in our elections soon from China. So it's a massive, massive vulnerability. Supreme Court's going to be hearing the birthright citizenship case. They have got to, for the future sake of the country, they've got to make the right decision and ban this practice.
Peter, let's focus, actually, we may come back to China in a moment, Mexico, because most Americans would understand what the Chinese motivation would be. They're pretty open about the fact they intend to supplant us. The Muslim Brotherhood, well, those scumbags have been around forever. We get that. What's Mexico's angle with trying to destabilize their neighbor and their most important trading partner by a mile?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when people think of the Mexican government, they think of them, okay, they're corrupt, they're kind of hapless. They don't really have a lot of plans. But the fact is, I quote them extensively in the book, they view mass migration to the United States as a means by which they can reconquista or reclaim parts of American territory. That sounds like this fantastic notion until you see how they say it over and over and over and over and over again. Top aides to Sheinbaum, the current president, senators, powerful journalists. And does that mean that they actually think California or Arizona are going to become part of Mexico? I don't know, but it does mean that they're going to exert sovereignty inside the United States, and they're already doing that. One of the most shocking things to me in the book, Jesse, is when I discovered that Mexico has Mexican government officials. These are Mexican senators and congressmen that serve in their parliament who actually live in the United States full time. And their job is to represent Mexicans living in the United States in front of the Mexican parliament. That is a massive intrusion on our sovereignty. And on top of that, with Mexico, you have an infrastructure that is designed to propel their interests into our country. They have 53 consulates here. That's almost 10 times as many as Great Britain has. They have 6. And these consulates, they're involved in our domestic politics. They are trying to prevent Republicans and people like Trump from getting elected because of their agenda on immigration. They are helping Democrats. And they are also neck deep in organizing these anti-ICE, these violent anti-immigration enforcement protests. So we need to be kicking these diplomats out of the country. This is not an appropriate role for a diplomat. They should not have this presence in the country. And so their goal is effectively to extend their sovereignty into the United States. And by the way, Jesse, they believe that they are accomplishing it.
Peter, is the Trump administration aware, I assume they are, about these groups getting involved in these protests, basically ginning up civil unrest in our streets?
So before the book came out, I had an opportunity to meet with the president in the Oval Office for about 55 minutes. He also had the Treasury Secretary Bessent there and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. So we briefed them on our findings involving China, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Mexico. And we also met with other officials in the Trump administration and have met with a number of senators and congressmen. In fact, I've been asked to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I think it's the second week of March. So they are aware of it. They are talking about taking action. There are a whole host of things that can be done by the executive branch. And we're hopeful that we're going to see some movement there in the days and weeks ahead.
The book is The Invisible Coup. This is one of those ones that's probably really important for you to understand what is happening out there. I highly recommend you go pick it up. Peter, I'm looking forward to this one. I appreciate you, man. Good luck. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.